A humiliating slap inside a luxury store ignites a firestorm when Amara, a black woman, is publicly disrespected by Daniel, the arrogant white store manager, who has no idea she's the secret billionaire owner of the entire chain. From the raw sting of that moment to the whispering corridors of power, the story unravels layers of systemic racism, betrayal, and abuse of privilege. As Amara battles back, she faces boardroom conspiracies, media storms, and an empire built on exclusion. Each chapter reveals the cracks in the facade, friends turning foes, allies rising from silence, and a nation watching as truth collides with power. With every step, dialogue burns like fire, exposing prejudice, fear, and defiance until poetic justice arrives. The abuser falls, the empire collapses, and Amara rises not just as an owner, but as a voice for all who've ever been silenced. This is not just a story of revenge, it's a rebirth. Amara Johnson pushed open the glass door of Haven Looks, a luxury store glittering with marble floors and gold accents. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair in a neat bun. Nothing about her screamed billionaire, and that was intentional. "Good afternoon," she said softly to the greeter. The greeter hesitated, plastered on a polite button smile. "Welcome." Other shoppers, a white couple, a young blonde influencer, were immediately showered with warmth. "Let me know if you need anything, miss," one sales associate chirped to them, tone bright and sugary. Amara walked slowly, eyes lingering on a glass case of handbags. She pressed her lips together, noticing the distance in every employee's body language when they looked at her. Finally, she approached the case. "Excuse me," she said to the nearest clerk. "Could I see that one?" She pointed at a sleek black handbag with silver trim. The clerk glanced nervously toward the front desk, where Daniel Harper, the store manager, stood with arms crossed. His tailored suit fit too snugly, his smile rehearsed, his eyes sharp. Daniel's gaze locked on Amara like a scanner. He strode over, voice low and deliberate. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right section?" Amara blinked. "I asked to see that handbag." "Those pieces," Daniel said, chuckling dryly, "are quite expensive." The clerk shifted uncomfortably. Amara's expression stayed calm, almost serene. "I didn't ask the price," she replied. "I asked to see it." Daniel tilted his head. "Policy requires us to be. We don't just take out items for anyone browsing." The words "for anyone" hung heavy. A couple nearby pretended not to hear. The influencer giggled into her phone but stole a glance, eyes wide. Amara folded her hands. "So others can see the handbags freely, but not me." Daniel's smile stiffened. "Don't twist my words, ma'am. I'm simply following rules." "Which rules, exactly?" Silence. He didn't have one. The clerk's lips parted, but Daniel cut her off with a sharp look. "Why don't you browse our lower collection first? We have wallets more affordable." Gasps whispered from behind. One customer muttered, "Did he just say that?" Another quickly hushed them. Amara's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I came for that handbag, nothing else." Daniel leaned closer, whispering just enough for nearby ears to catch. "Listen, we've had problems before. People walking in, pretending. I can't just hand over a luxury item to someone who might." He trailed off, eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Might what?" Amara asked, her eyes locking with his. The pause stretched. The weight of his implication was unmistakable. Daniel exhaled, shifting his tone louder. "We're running a business here. If you can't respect that, maybe this store isn't for you." The atmosphere thickened. Employees froze. Customers stared at shoes, at walls, anywhere but at Amara. The silence itself became complicit. Amara finally nodded, stepping back from the case. "I see." Her voice trembled not with fear, but with restrained fire. She turned to leave, but not before meeting Daniel's eyes once more. "You'll regret this," she whispered, not as a threat, but as prophecy. The door closed behind her. The marble floors gleamed, but the air inside was poisoned, heavy with what had just occurred, and yet not one person moved. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the spotless windows of Haven Looks. The handbags gleamed like trophies, yet the air felt brittle, charged, as if yesterday's silence still haunted the store. Amara walked back in, calm, unflinching. She wore the same navy dress, no jewelry. Her poise unsettled the staff more than anger ever could. "Good morning," she said softly. The greeter swallowed hard. "Morning, ma'am." Daniel Harper emerged from the back office, expression hardening the moment he saw her. "You again," he muttered. Amara's tone was even. I'd like to see the handbag I asked for yesterday. His jaw flexed. I told you, we have policies. You never showed me those policies, she replied. Daniel smirked, stepping closer. Look, lady, this isn't a library. You don't come in here window shopping for status. Either buy something realistic or stop wasting our time. Gasps fluttered through the store. Customers paused, mid-browse, sensing tension. Amara's voice sharpened slightly. You assume I can't afford it. Daniel barked a laugh. Let's be honest. Do you really look like the kind of person who drops 10 grand on a bag? The words pierced the silence like glass shattering. A young clerk whispered, Sir, please. But Daniel shot her a glare that silenced her instantly. Amara's lips pressed together. Her breathing slowed. You don't know me, Daniel sneered. I know enough. I've been in this business 15 years. I can spot who's real and who's just playing pretend. 15 years, Amara repeated quietly. And you've learned so little. The customers shifted uncomfortably. A woman clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, Don't stare. Daniel's tone grew sharper, his voice rising. People like you come in here all the time, touching things you can't buy, wasting my employees' energy, causing trouble. Not today. Amara straightened her back, eyes fierce now. People like me. The room froze, the unspoken weight of centuries condensed into that phrase. Yes, Daniel said, doubling down, as if daring the world to contradict him. You think I don't see through it? I've had to call security more than once on your type. Her eyes narrowed. My type. He took a step closer, invading her space. You want me to spell it out? Whispers erupted. Someone pulled out a phone, discreetly filming. Amara's voice didn't tremble. Do it. Spell it out. Daniel's face flushed red, his mouth twisted with ugly certainty. You don't belong here. The words hung jagged and raw. A hush consumed the store. Even the background music seemed to fade. Amara's reply was almost a whisper, yet it carried, This store sells handbags. I asked to see one, that's all. Daniel's nostrils flared. Don't play innocent with me. Her eyes locked on his. You're humiliating yourself, not me. That final sentence cracked his composure. Rage surged through him, fueled by pride, by the fear of losing control in front of witnesses. Before anyone could stop him, his hand flew slap. The sound echoed across the marble floor. Sharp as a gunshot, Amara's head jerked to the side, hair loosening from her bun. The red imprint burned on her cheek. Gasps tore through the room. Someone screamed. A man muttered, Oh my God. Phones lifted. Recordings began in earnest now. Daniel's chest heaved, his hand still raised as if frozen in the act. His own shock flickered across his face, but pride shoved it away. She was being disruptive. He snapped quickly. I had to. She was threatening me. No, a clerk blurted, her voice trembling. She wasn't quiet. Daniel barked. Get back to work. The clerk shrank, eyes watering. Amara didn't move for a long moment. The silence was suffocating. Then, slowly, she straightened her posture. Her voice was low, steady, devastating. You put your hands on me for asking to see a handbag. Daniel jabbed a finger toward her. You were causing a scene. I don't tolerate troublemakers in my store. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stood with a quiet dignity that made the room ache. You think this ends here? She asked softly. Daniel scoffed. You'll walk out that door and nobody will care. Customers forget. People like you don't matter in places like this. His words oozed venom, but his voice trembled. Somewhere inside, he already sensed he had gone too far. The bystanders shifted uneasily. A man whispered to his wife, We should say something. She tugged his arm. Don't get involved. Another customer muttered, She should sue. His friend hushed him quickly. Amara touched her cheek lightly. The sting burned, but her spirit was steel. She looked Daniel squarely in the eyes. You've already lost, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing like thunder across the marble floor. The doors swung shut behind her. Inside, the silence roared louder than any protest could. Employees stared at the floor. Customers shifted guiltily. Phones still recorded, but no one moved to intervene. No one dared to stand beside her. Daniel adjusted his suit, trying to salvage authority. Show's over. Back to shopping. Everyone. But the eyes that lingered on him weren't the same as before. They were filled with judgment, disgust, and disbelief. And though no one spoke, a silent verdict had already been delivered. The door closed behind Amara, but the sting of her absence filled the luxury store like smoke after a fire. Daniel adjusted his tie, pretending authority hadn't cracked in his hands. All right, people, back to shopping. Nobody moved. Customers shuffled awkwardly. Employees stood stiff as mannequins. A young sales associate whispered, "She didn't do anything." Daniel snapped, "Enough." She was escalating, escalating. A woman near the handbags said, her voice sharp, "She asked to see a bag. That's all." Daniel turned on her. "Ma'am, I don't need commentary. Management has standards. Standards." The woman cut in. "You hit her." Gasps. Phones kept recording. Someone whispered, "This is going online." Daniel's eyes darted to the cameras. His voice hardened. "I acted within company policy. Theft prevention." She was aggressive. A man in a business suit frowned. "Aggressive." She barely raised her voice. "She intimidated staff." Daniel said quickly. "You all saw how she stood, how she looked at me. I've seen this before." Classic manipulation. The words felt rehearsed, like excuses polished over years of practice. One employee, Marissa, the youngest clerk, whispered to her colleague, "He's lying. She didn't do anything." Her colleague hissed, "Don't get involved. You'll lose your job." Marissa's throat tightened. Fear outweighed truth. Daniel clapped his hands. "Everyone, let's move forward. She's gone." End of discussion. But the discussion didn't end. It smoldered in whispers, in recorded videos, in the uneasy glances bouncing around the store. Outside, Amara walked slowly to her car. Her cheek burned, but her silence burned hotter. Inside the car, she placed her hands on the steering wheel. She didn't start the engine. She just sat, listening to her breath. Her thoughts cut deep. This is not the first time, but it will be the last. She remembered being 15. Stopped in a department store by a guard who accused her of pocketing lipstick she never touched. She remembered college, where a professor once told her she spoke well for someone like you. She remembered dinners, boardrooms, parties, always proving herself, always enduring. And now, here she was, struck across the face, in public, for daring to exist in a space that didn't want her. Amara closed her eyes. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the sharp edge of patience, honed over years. Back inside, Daniel tried to smooth things over. "To all customers," he said loudly, "we apologize for the disruption. We value your safety and trust." His voice quivered slightly, but he masked it with a salesman's grin. The woman who had spoken earlier crossed her arms. Safety. She was the one attacked. Daniel ignored her. "Let's focus on serving you all. Discounts available today." "Discounts," another customer interrupted, disbelief dripping from his tone. "You just assaulted someone, and now you're pitching sales." Daniel's smile cracked. "Sir, if you're unhappy, you may leave." The man shook his head. "You'll be hearing from lawyers." Daniel's face flushed red, but he doubled down. "Go ahead. She has no case, no credibility. People like that always." He stopped himself mid-sentence, realizing he was on the edge of saying too much. But it was too late. Phones had caught it. Marissa bit her lip, whispering to the older clerk beside her, "Why doesn't anyone speak up?" The older woman's side eyes sad. "Because jobs are fragile. Because people are scared," Marissa whispered. But she let it go. So Marissa let the silence press down on her, heavy as stone. Amara finally started her car. The engine hummed, grounding her in the present. Her phone buzzed messages from friends, reminders of meetings, notifications from financial advisors, but she ignored them all. Her reflection in the mirror showed the faint red mark still on her cheek. She touched it gently, then lowered her hand. Her voice, quiet but resolute, filled the car. "Not again. Not anymore." She drove off, her silence carrying more weight than the noise left behind. Back at Haven Looks, Daniel tried to rewrite the story before it spread. "Team meeting, now," he ordered, gathering employees in the back. His voice was clipped, sharp with authority. "Here's what happened. She became disruptive. I attempted to de-escalate. She threatened me verbally. I defended myself." A ripple of disbelief passed through the staff, but no one contradicted him. "Repeat it if anyone asks," Daniel commanded. "Company loyalty is everything. If corporate calls, you back me up." Marissa stared at the floor, trembling. She whispered under her breath, too soft for anyone to hear, "That's not what happened." But silence swallowed her words. In the glittering showroom, the handbags still gleamed, the marble still shone. Customers slowly dispersed, whispering about what they had witnessed, clutching their phones with evidence tucked safely inside. Daniel thought he had controlled the narrative. He thought silence meant victory. But silence was not absence. It was gathering weight, and soon, it would speak louder than him. Amara parked her car in the quiet underground garage of her penthouse. The echo of her footsteps against concrete sounded heavier than usual. She carried no shopping bags, only the memory of Daniel's hand across her cheek. Inside her apartment, the city skyline stretched before her like a glittering painting. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in golden light. The world would assume whoever lived here was untouchable, immune to insult or humiliation. But Amara knew better. Money shielded her from some battles, never from all. She placed her keys on the counter and finally let out the sigh she had been holding. Her phone buzzed again, dozens of unread messages. She silenced it. Tonight, the world could wait. She drifted to her study, where walls of books told the story of her life. Business strategy manuals, histories of civil rights, personal journals filled with her own handwriting. One photo sat framed on her desk, a teenage Amara, in a thrift store dress, holding a community scholarship award, her mother's proud arms wrapped around her. She touched the frame, and memories poured back. 15 years old, a department store in Birmingham. She had saved her babysitting money for a tube of lipstick, dreaming of wearing it to a school dance. "Empty your pockets," the security guard had ordered. Amara had frozen. I didn't take anything." The guard's eyes scanned her like a scanner, searching for guilt. Other shoppers stared, some whispering, none defending. Her mother had arrived just in time, forcing a brittle smile. "We'll leave." They left, humiliated. Amara never bought the lipstick. 20-2 years old. Harvard Business School. She had raised her hand in a strategy class. Her professor chuckled lightly. "You're very articulate. For someone like you." The class went silent. Some smirked, others looked away. Amara had clenched her jaw, taking notes, swallowing fury. 30 years old. She stood in a gleaming boardroom, negotiating her first acquisition deal. Men in tailored suits leaned back in their chairs, testing her. "Are you sure you have the capital?" one asked, tone dripping with disbelief. She had smiled, slid the signed checks across the table, and bought the company outright. They never underestimated her again. The flashbacks dissolved, and she returned to the present. Amara leaned back in her leather chair, staring out at the skyline. She whispered to herself, "I fought too hard to be invisible in spaces I own." Because she did own them, not just stocks and small shares. She was the majority investor in Havenlooks Holdings, the conglomerate behind dozens of luxury retail chains across the country, including the very store where Daniel had struck her. But she never announced it. She chose anonymity in everyday life. She walked into her stores dressed simply, deliberately. She wanted to see how her employees treated strangers, how they handled power when they thought no one was watching. And yesterday, Daniel had shown her everything she needed to know. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up. A text from her assistant. "Board meeting tomorrow. All executives confirmed attendance." Amara typed back, "Good. Don't mention me until I walk in." She set the phone down and exhaled. For a moment, her mind replayed the slap, the sting, the hush of the room, the way bystanders looked away instead of stepping forward. She touched her cheek again. The mark was fading now, but the memory wouldn't. "Not the first time," she murmured, "but it will be the last." Her eyes narrowed, resolve hardened in her chest. Later that evening, she called her mother. "Baby." Her mother's warm voice answered, "How was your day?" Amara hesitated. "Rough. Talk to me." Amara recounted the incident in Neil's tone, his words, the slap. She tried to tell it calmly, but her voice cracked halfway through. Her mother was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'm so sorry, Amara. I thought it wouldn't get to me anymore," Amara confessed. "Not after all I've built. Not after everything." "Sweetheart," her mother said gently, "you've climbed mountains, but mountains don't erase scars. They just make you taller when you carry them." Amara closed her eyes. "I want this to mean something, not just another wound." "Then make it mean something," her mother whispered. "You have the power." Amara nodded slowly, though her mother couldn't see. That night, Amara stood on her balcony. The city lights blinked below, unaware of the storm brewing in one penthouse. She imagined Daniel, smug and unrepentant, walking into tomorrow's boardroom without knowing she would be sitting at the head of the table. The thought didn't comfort her, it ignited her. She whispered into the night air, a promise to herself and to every girl who had been humiliated in silence. This time, the silence will break. The Havenlooks headquarters sat in a glass tower overlooking downtown Atlanta. Inside its top-floor boardroom, A long mahogany table stretched beneath chandeliers, the kind of room designed to intimidate. Executives filed in, men and women in pressed suits, carrying portfolios and coffee cups. Murmuring about quarterly numbers, they settled into leather chairs, not realizing a storm was about to shatter their calm. At the head of the table, the chairman tapped his notes. "We'll begin shortly." Daniel Harper strolled in confidently, greeting a few directors with forced familiarity. He carried himself taller than usual, as if yesterday's violence had inflated his sense of control. "Quite the day yesterday," he chuckled to a colleague. "Had to deal with the situation in store. A woman trying to make trouble." The colleague raised a brow. "Trouble?" Daniel smirked. "The type who walks in, touching things they can't afford, acting entitled. I put her in her place. Had no choice." The colleague shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exuding false ease. "This company needs managers like me, people who aren't afraid to enforce rules. Otherwise, you let the wrong crowd in, and suddenly your brand is cheapened." The words hung heavy, veiled in coded language everyone recognized but pretended not to hear. Some nodded faintly. Others stared at their notes, unwilling to engage. The chairman cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our majority shareholder is joining us today. She rarely attends in person, but she'll be observing this meeting." Chairs shifted. Murmurs fluttered. The door opened. Amara Johnson stepped inside. Simple navy dress, hair in a neat bun. Calm, steady eyes. Daniel's smirk faltered, then quickly reassembled. He didn't recognize her at first, till the faint mark on her cheek caught his eye. His blood ran cold. Her presence was like a sudden shift in gravity. Executives straightened, the air thick with realization. "This is her," the chairman gestured. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Amara Johnson, majority shareholder of Havenlooks Holdings." The room erupted in polite greetings, voices stumbling over themselves. "Ms. Johnson, an honor, welcome." Daniel's jaw dropped. "Waiter." His voice cracked with disbelief. Amara took her seat at the head of the table, her gaze cool, unwavering. "Good morning, everyone." Silence stretched. Every executive avoided Daniel's eyes. The chairman tried to continue. "We're here to review Q2 earnings." Amara raised a hand. "We'll get to numbers later. First, I want to hear what happened yesterday at one of our flagship stores." The table stiffened. Daniel's throat bobbed. "I was there," Amara said softly, her voice carrying more weight than a shout. "In that store." Gasps broke the air. Amara folded her hands. "And I want to hear hear of why your store manager put his hands on me." Daniel jolted upright, hands waving nervously. "Ms. Johnson, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't know who you were." Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't need to know who I was. I was a customer." "That should have been enough," he stammered. "I thought you were suspicious, acting out." "We've had thefts before," she cut him off. "I asked to see a handbag, nothing more." The silence was suffocating. Executives shifted in their chairs, unable to meet her gaze. Daniel's words spilled in desperation. If I'd known you were the owner, of course I would have stopped." Her voice cracked like glass. "If I were anyone else, someone without money, without power, how would you have treated me?" Daniel froze. His face paled. Amara's eyes swept the table. "And the rest of you, you sit here, managing a company that markets luxury, sophistication, exclusivity. But what does that mean when your employees humiliate black women in public? When a manager raises his hand to a customer? When silence is the response?" No one spoke. Their shame was its own confession. Finally, one director cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, surely this was an isolated incident." Her glare cut him down. "Isolated? Do you think I don't know how deep this runs? I've read your emails. I've seen your hiring numbers. I've sat in rooms where people like me are discussed as liabilities, not customers." The director swallowed, retreating into silence. Amara turned back to Daniel. "Tell them exactly what you said to me." He shook his head frantically. "I don't recall." Her voice sharpened. "You said, you don't belong here." The words hung in the room like a curse. Several executives closed their eyes. One muttered, "Dear God." Amara leaned forward. "Tell me, Daniel, who exactly belongs, and who doesn't?" He stuttered, sweating, words tripping over themselves. I didn't mean you meant every word." Her tone was quiet, surgical. "That slap wasn't just your hand. It was centuries of arrogance, condensed into one moment." The boardroom was silent but for the sound of Daniel's rapid breathing. Amara rose to her feet. "This company profits from the very people you humiliate." from the labor of those who will never sit at this table, from customers who deserve respect, not suspicion. And you, she pointed directly at Daniel, you are the face of everything we claim to stand against. Daniel's mask cracked. He slammed his palms on the table. This is ridiculous. You're exaggerating, making me a scapegoat. I've dedicated years to this company. I enforce rules. If you punish me, you're punishing loyalty. Amara tilted her head, unflinching. Loyalty to what? To justice? Or to your own prejudice? He had no answer. The chairman finally spoke, his voice shaky. Given the seriousness of this matter, we must address accountability. Amara's gaze swept across the table. There will be accountability. I'll make sure of it. Daniel's voice broke into pleading. Please, Ms. Johnson, I didn't know. If I'd realized who you were, she cut him off, colder than ice. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have needed to know. The weight of her words slammed into the room. Executives exchanged glances, shame reflected in their eyes. Amara sat again, folding her hands. We'll finish this discussion soon. But know this, silence is complicity. And I've had enough of silence. She leaned back, her voice calm but lethal. The world will know what happened. Daniel's face, drained of color. The boardroom no longer felt safe for him. His kingdom of marble and chandeliers was crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of the truth. It began with a shaky cell phone video. A customer in the Haven Looks flagship store had captured everything: the raised hand, the sharp slap, Amara's stunned expression, the manager's cold dismissal. By dawn, the clip was everywhere. On Twitter, hashtags flared like wildfire. Hashtag slapped for shopping, hashtag luxury while black, hashtag boycott Haven, LUXE. On Instagram, the video looped endlessly, slowed down, analyzed, captioned with fury. A manager slapped a black woman for daring to touch a handbag. Within hours, millions had watched. No one yet realized the woman in the video was the billionaire majority owner. At her penthouse window, Amara watched the city glow with morning light. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Journalists, allies, activists. Naya burst in, holding a laptop. Emirates, everywhere. CNN, BBC, local news. You're trending worldwide. Amara didn't flinch. Good. Naya bit her lip. They don't know it's you. Not yet. Amara turned. Let them focus on the act. That slap wasn't about MIT. Was about every black woman who's ever been told she doesn't belong. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburban kitchen, Daniel's wife scrolled her phone in horror. Daniel, it's you. The whole world is watching. Daniel rushed over, snatched the phone, and stared at his own face, frozen mid-slap. No, he whispered. This is out of context. His wife's eyes brimmed with tears. How do you explain slapping a woman in front of witnesses, on camera? Daniel's chest heaved. He dialed frantically his district supervisor, HR, anyone, voicemail, silence. His fortress was collapsing faster than he could patch the walls. At Haven Looks headquarters, the PR team scrambled. One executive snapped, "We need a statement. Something generic, condemn the action, suspend the manager, say it doesn't reflect company values." Another countered, "Too late for that. It's already a symbol." Protesters are organizing outside our flagship store. Screens lit up with footage of crowds chanting, holding signs, "Not luxury, just racism." The CEO buried his face in his hands. Where is Ms. Johnson? Has anyone spoken to her? A silence fell. They all knew she wasn't answering because she didn't have to. By noon, downtown Atlanta pulsed with outrage. Protesters gathered, voices rising. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it now? Chants echoed off glass towers, bouncing through streets usually filled with shopping bags and valet lines. Police cruisers idled nearby, nervous. Cameras swarmed. On the steps of the flagship store, an older black woman raised her megaphone. That slap wasn't just one hand. It was every insult, every humiliation, every locked door we faced. The crowd roared. Shoppers stopped to film. Cars honked in solidarity. The store's marble facade, once a symbol of prestige, now looked like a fortress under siege. Inside the store, employees huddled behind counters, pale and silent. A young sales associate whispered, "He always talked like that, about who belonged and who didn't." Another added, trembling, "I wanted to speak up, but I was scared." They looked at each other, shame pressing heavier than fear. For the first time, silence felt impossible. By evening, the video had reached Capitol Hill. Lawmakers tweeted their condemnation. Civil rights groups announced boycotts. Celebrities reposted the clip with fiery captions. And still, Amara remained silent, watching, waiting. In his apartment, Daniel's phone rang. He answered on the first ring. Hello, it was the CEO. His voice was tight, clipped. Daniel, step down immediately. Resign. We'll announce it tonight. Daniel's world spun. Resign. I've given years to this company. I won't be thrown under the bus. You already burned the bus. The CEO snapped. The shareholders want blood. If you don't resign, you'll be terminated by morning. Daniel's hand shook so violently he nearly dropped the phone. This isn't fair, he whispered. The line went dead. At the penthouse, Nia watched the news anchor declare, the Haven Looks manager has resigned after public outrage. But the story doesn't end there. Sources suggest the victim may have deeper ties to the company than anyone realized. Nia turned. They're starting to put it together. Amara stood by the window, expression unreadable. Let them, she said softly. Truth doesn't need to be rushed. It arrives when it's ready. That night, the protests swelled into thousands. Drones captured aerial shots of streets flooded with voices, signs waving like a sea of resistance. No justice, no profit, they shouted. A woman held a sign with Amara's blurred image from the video, the red mark on her cheek circled in bold ink. Underneath, her pain is ours. The chant rolled through the crowd. Her pain is ours. Her pain is ours. Back inside Haven Looks headquarters, the boardroom lights burned late. Executives whispered in corners, terrified of what tomorrow would bring. One muttered, if she speaks publicly, it's over, for all of us. Another whispered back, she already has the power, we just didn't realize it. At midnight, Amara finally picked up her phone. She opened Twitter, her fingers steady. She typed slowly, deliberately. I wasn't just a customer. I am the majority owner of Haven Looks Holdings. And yesterday, I was assaulted in my own store by the very manager entrusted to represent my company. Racism hides behind luxury. Silence protects it. Not anymore. She hit send. Within seconds, the internet erupted again. This time, with her name, with her face, with the truth. The world now knew. The black woman humiliated in that store was the billionaire who owned it, and nothing would ever be the same. The morning after Amara's revelation, the world felt split in two. Before her tweet, and after. Cable news anchors spoke her name on repeat. Headlines screamed across every platform. Billionaire owner slapped in her own store. Luxury brand in freefall after racism scandal. How power shifts when silence breaks. Haven Looks' stock plummeted by 15% before markets even opened. In the sleek corporate tower, panic reigned. Inside the boardroom, the CEO slammed his fist on the table. We're bleeding value. Investors are calling now. Some are threatening to pull out completely. One director whispered, because of a tweet. No, another corrected, because of the truth. The CEO's jaw tightened. We need to control the narrative. Distance the company from this manager. Frame it as an isolated act. Across the table, a quieter voice spoke. Except it wasn't isolated. And she owns the company. She decides the narrative now. The room fell silent on her penthouse. Amara sat with Naya and a circle of trusted advisors. Coffee cups littered the table. Screens displayed live feeds of protests growing in cities across the country. An advisor leaned forward. They're scrambling. The CEO is trying to get ahead of you. Rumors say he's planning to announce a diversity initiative standard PR play. Amara shook her head. Too late for window dressing. They want to paint this as one slap. But it's not about one man, one moment. It's systemic. Nia asked softly. How far are you willing to go? Amara's voice was steady. As far as truth demands. In suburban cul-de-sacs and downtown cafes, employees whispered among themselves. At one regional office, a black assistant told a coworker, I've been passed over 3 times. They always say I don't fit the brand. Her coworker swallowed hard. I've heard the same excuses. Suddenly, stories flooded social media. Anonymous accounts, leaked emails, internal memos. Employees shared tales of discrimination buried under polished logos. The empire was cracking not from external attacks, but from its own walls caving in. Daniel, meanwhile, was drowning. Reporters camped outside his house. Strangers shouted slurs, threats, and curses. His phone buzzed with blocked calls and venomous voicemails. On a trembling live stream, he tried to defend himself. I made a mistake, but this cancel culture, it's destroying lives. I was doing my job. The comments section shredded him apart. You weren't doing a job. You were flexing power. Cry harder. Should've thought of this before you slapped her. Even his allies abandoned him. The local business association revoked his membership. His old colleagues ignored his calls. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt powerless back in the tower. The board convened again. We can't survive this without her, one executive muttered. If Ms. Johnson pulls her shares, we collapse. Another clenched her teeth. But she is the scandal. She's both the victim and the majority shareholder. How do you manage that? The CEO massaged his temples. We offer her control. More say in branding, in operations. We make her the face of our reform. But one director, older and shrewder, shook his head. She doesn't want to be a face. She wants change. And change threatens us. Eyes darted nervously around the table. Because he was right. Amara wasn't here to polish the empire. She was here to remake it, to watch it fall. That afternoon, Amara received an invitation. The CEO wanted a private dinner. Just the two of them. Nia bristled. It's a trap. He'll try to charm you, negotiate, maybe even intimidate. Amara smiled faintly. Good, let him try. The restaurant was candlelit, hushed, the kind of place where secrets lived between crystal glasses. The CEO arrived with a practiced smile. Amara, thank you for coming. She studied him coolly. Let's not pretend this is social. You're afraid. That's why I'm here. He chuckled nervously. I wouldn't put it that way. I just think maybe we can resolve this, quietly, without more damage. Damage, she echoed. You mean to profits, to reputation. He spread his hands. Look, we'll fire Harper officially. We'll roll out diversity programs. We'll donate to charities. We'll make this right. Her eyes sharpened. Make yourselves look right. You mean? The CEO leaned in, dropping his voice. Let's be realistic. Haven Looks isn't just a brand, it's an empire. It employs thousands, feeds families, drives economies. If this continues, you'll destroy the company you own. Is that what you want? Amara didn't flinch. If a house is built on rot, sometimes you tear it down before you rebuild. The CEO's mask slipped for just a second, fear flickering behind his eyes. Amara stood. Enjoy your dinner. The era of silence is over. And she walked away, leaving him with his untouched wine. That night, more cracks appeared. Whistleblowers released documents showing Haven Looks' hiring disparities, wage gaps, and surveillance policies disproportionately targeting black shoppers. News anchors pounced, analysts dissected, customers posted videos cutting up their store cards, vowing never to shop there again. The empire was unraveling, and at its center, Amara didn't look away. The next morning, she sat with eyes heavy from lack of sleep but burning with resolve. Naya asked, "What now?" Amara looked out at the city below, where protests still swelled, where voices refused to be silenced. Now, she said softly, we bring the whole truth into the light. And for the first time in decades, Haven Looks' gleaming tower trembled not from markets, not from competition, but from the voices it had ignored for too long. The day Haven Looks was supposed to unveil its reform plan, the world was already watching. The press conference had been hastily arranged. Reporters packed the gilded lobby, cameras aimed at the podium beneath the company's shimmering logo. Executives shifted nervously in their seats, sweat beading on brows despite the air conditioning. The CEO adjusted his tie. We'll control the narrative, he whispered to a colleague. We present reforms, apologize, announce donations. We survive. He forced a smile as he stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Haven Looks has always stood for excellence, for inclusivity. The room erupted in laughter and boos. Journalists shouted over each other, excellence, while managers assault customers. Where's Amara Johnson? What do you say about the leaked documents? The CEO's smile faltered. We acknowledge mistakes. We are implementing immediate changes, including diversity training. The doors opened. Gasps rippled through the room. Amara Johnson entered, no security, no entourage, just herself, steady and unshaken. Walking directly to the podium, the cameras pivoted instantly. The CEO stepped back, face pale. Amara looked out at the crowd. I wasn't scheduled to speak, but I have something to say. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust high. Her voice carried like a blade slicing air. Yesterday, this company tried to frame racism as an isolated act, a slap by one man, but that's a lie. That slap was the symptom of a disease that runs deep in these walls. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Behind her, I have seen the emails. I have seen the hiring statistics. I have lived the silence in boardrooms where men in suits decide who belongs and who doesn't. And yesterday, I was told in front of customers and staff by my own employee that I don't belong in the empire I'd built. Gasps filled the room. The CEO whispered urgently to a staffer, "Cut the feed," but it was too late. Live streams carried every word to millions. Amara's gaze swept the crowd. "Let me be clear. I am the majority shareholder of Haven Looks. This company is mine, and today I am making changes." Reporters erupted, shouting questions. One broke through. "Miss Johnson, what happens to the manager who assaulted you?" Amara's jaw tightened. "Daniel Harper is finished. Not just here, everywhere. His license, his standing, his credibility, it's gone. Actions have consequences." Across the city, in his dim apartment, Daniel watched the light. His face burned with rage and humiliation. He hurled a glass at the wall. "She ruined me," he screamed. "Over one slap," his wife whispered from the doorway. "It wasn't just one slap, Daniel. It was everything behind it." But he wasn't listening. He collapsed into a chair, finally grasping the truth. His empire of arrogance had no walls left to hold him. Back in the lobby, Amara wasn't finished. "To the executives who sat in silence while racism thrived, your silence is complicity, and silence will no longer be tolerated." She turned, her eyes cold as steel, staring at the board lined up behind her. "Effective immediately, I am dissolving this board. Haven Looks will be rebuilt with new leadership, with accountability, with voices that reflect the communities we claim to serve." The CEO lurched forward. You can't, just," Amara's voice cut through. "I own 51% of this company. I can, and I just did." The cameras caught his face crumbling in disbelief. The crowd roared. Reporters shouted frantically, capturing history live. Outside, protesters who had gathered by the thousands cheered as Amara's words streamed onto giant outdoor screens. "Her pain is ours," they chanted again, louder, prouder. Now, it wasn't just pain, it was victory. Executives filed out of the lobby, faces ashen, their careers evaporating in real time. Some whispered bitterly about betrayal. Others wept quietly, knowing they had played their part in the silence. Amara remained at the podium, her voice softened but carried even stronger. Haven Looks will no longer be a fortress for the privileged few. It will be a platform for justice, for equity, for voices silenced too long. Reporters leaned forward, breathless. This isn't about handbags. This isn't about profit margins. This is about dignity. And no luxury in the world is worth more than that. The applause was thunderous, echoing through marble halls. Later that night, alone on her balcony, Amara finally let the weight settle. The city glittered beneath her, but her gaze was inward, heavy with memory. She touched her cheek where the slap had landed. The skin had healed, but the mark lingered deeper, etched into history now. Not just flesh. Naya joined her quietly. "You burned it all down today." Amara nodded. "Sometimes fire is the only way to clear the rot." "Do you think they'll hate you for it?" "They already did," Amara said softly. "But now, they'll respect me or fall behind." She exhaled, steady. "Either way, silence is broken. That's all that matters." Meanwhile, in the streets below, chants carried through the night, voices of every age, every color, rising together. "Her pain is ours. Her fight is ours." And for once, the empire of marble and chandeliers trembled not with arrogance, but with the weight of change. Amara had turned her humiliation into justice, her silence into thunder. The fall of Haven Looks was not an end, it was a beginning. A week after the fall, the Haven Looks tower stood quieter than anyone remembered. The marble lobby was stripped of its usual shine. Reporters no longer camped by the doors, and the once proud executives who roamed its halls were gone. What remained was a skeleton company hollowed out, waiting to see what it might become. In the penthouse boardroom, sunlight spilled across empty chairs. Only one seat was filled. Amara sat at the head of the table, calm, steady, her hands folded on polished wood. For the first time, she wasn't here to fight for space. She owned the space. Naya entered, carrying fresh reports. "The dust is settling. Media's calling it the fastest corporate upheaval in recent history. Some investors fled, but new ones are knocking people who believe in your vision." Amara glanced at the numbers, but didn't linger. "And the employee, flooding HR with relief, stories, testimonies, ideas. They feel free for the first time." A faint smile touched Amara's lips. "Good. That's where change begins." 2 days later, the doors reopened not for luxury shoppers, but for community voices. The lobby became a stage. Local leaders, activists, former employees, and customers gathered where mannequins once stood. Cameras flashed, but this time, the moment didn't belong to scandal. It belonged to possibility. Amara stepped to the microphone. This building used to stand as a monument to exclusion. Today, it opens as a platform for inclusion. Haven Looks will no longer be just a brand. It will be a bridge. Applause rippled through the crowd. She continued, her voice firm but warm. From today forward, we commit to equity at every level. Hiring, pay, leadership. Our stores will be safe spaces, not battlegrounds. Luxury will not mean shutting people out. It will mean lifting people up. The words struck like a promise, echoing into streets that had marched for her, cried for her, fought for her. Behind the podium, a small group of employees stood, visibly moved. One young associate, tears brimming, whispered to another, "I stayed silent for years. I thought my voice didn't matter. She's making it matter." The other nodded. "Feels like we finally belong." Meanwhile, Daniel's name disappeared from headlines. He became a ghost, fired, disgraced, abandoned even by those who once laughed at his cruel jokes. Job applications went unanswered. His reputation followed him like a scar. He watched Amara's speech from a dingy motel, bitterness curdling in his chest. "She destroyed me," he muttered. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had destroyed himself. That evening, Amara sat with Naya on the rooftop garden, watching the city breathe. "Do you think this will last?" Nia asked quietly. Amara gazed at the skyline. "Change isn't a moment. It's a movement. A company can shift overnight. A culture takes longer. But we've lit the fire." She sipped her tea, eyes calm. "They can't put it out now." In the weeks that followed, Haven Look stores reopened with new policies, new leadership, new faces. Advertisements featured real customers, not airbrushed fantasies. Training programs focused on empathy, history, accountability. Some skeptics scoffed, some old loyalists walked away, but new customers stepped in, people who felt seen for the first time. Sales didn't just recover, they grew, because dignity, it turned out, was a currency more powerful than exclusivity. At the grand reopening of the flagship store, Amara walked through the doors not as a shopper, not as a victim, but as the owner who had remade her empire. Reporters swarmed, asking what this moment meant. She paused, then spoke with quiet conviction. "It means I belong," and the words carried farther than any slap ever could. Later that night, Amara stood alone in the store, lights dimmed, displays gleaming. Her reflection stared back from a mirrored wall. For a moment, she saw both versions of herself, the woman humiliated, and the woman reborn. The journey between them had been painful, brutal, but it had carved something indestructible. She whispered to the empty room, as if to history itself, "No one will ever tell me I don't belong again." Outside, the city moved forward. Streets that had echoed with chants now pulsed with possibility. Children who had seen her face on screens whispered her name with pride. And in that, the real rebirth had begun, because Amara's victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, slapped, told they didn't belong. Her pain had become their power. Her rebirth had become their revolution. And the empire she rebuilt wasn't marble or chandeliers. It was justice.